origin of his so-called world of matter is as immaterial as his mind. Science holds that ultimate substance is to be found only in the universal ether. This universal ether, we have seen, is a something which is practically a no-thing. It is an absolutely immaterial substance. It possesses no more solid materiality than does mind. Even under the most materialistic theory, it is held that the universe is a phenomenal manifestation of a most immaterial reality. Those who find it easier to think of the universe as a phenomenal manifestation in the universal ether than as a phenomenal appearance in universal mind should not forget that there is really very little difference between a universal ether in which life and mind are held to abide and our conception of spirit, which is pure substance, pure energy, pure life, pure mind, which is essence, nature, substance, and principle of all that is. At the last, the conception of the universal ether is seen to be but little more than an emphasis of the substance and energy of ultimate reality, while the conception of spirit is an emphasis of the life and mind of ultimate reality. There is surely room here for a sane reconciliation between materialism and idealism. The universe as an idea. The phenomenal universe as a whole, and in its every part, is perceived to exist only as an ideal appearance in spirit considered as universal mind. The mastery of being. 110. The term ideal, as here used, means of the nature of the image of an object apprehended, thought of, or conceived in the mind. The term appearance, as here used, means that which is perceived by and is visible to the apprehension of the mind. The combined term ideal appearance, then, is seen to mean that which is conceived in and perceived by the mind. It is not only perceived as visible to universal mind, but has also been actually created and conceived in and by universal mind. The above statement embodies and expresses the fundamental principle of the great philosophical school of idealism, which contends that matter cannot be conceived to actually exist, as the only real substance is universal mind, and that the material and phenomenal universe is nothing but a series of mental appearances and impressions which appear and disappear in accordance with mental laws which are called the laws of nature, that the only reality of the phenomenal world consists in its being consciously perceived by God, Spirit, the Absolute, or whatever ultimate reality may be termed. Monistic idealism. Monistic idealism, or idealistic monism, is the flower of philosophic thought and is found wherever philosophy has dared to carry its speculations to their ultimate conclusion. It forms the highest peak of Western philosophy, and in the philosophy of the East it occupies an equally high position. In the Western world, some of the greatest philosophers have advanced its principles, and it is claimed that they never have been successfully controverted. In the Eastern world, represented by Hindu thought, the Vedanta, in its school of unqualified monism, has always successfully challenged attack. Of the latter school, it has been said that it is the highest pinnacle of philosophic thought which the human mind can possibly attain. Schlegel says of it, even the loftiest philosophy of the Europeans, the idealism of reason, as it is set forth by the Greek philosophers, appears in comparison with the abundant. The nature of creation. 111. Light and vigor of Oriental idealism, like a Promethean spark in the full flood of heavenly glory of the noonday sun, faltering and feeble and ever ready to be extinguished. Max Muller says of it, no philosopher, not excepting Heraclitus, Plato, Kant, or Hegel, has ventured to erect such a spire, never frightened by storms or lightnings. Stone follows upon stone, in regular succession, after once the first step has been made, after once it has been clearly seen that in the beginning there can have been but one, as there will be but one in the end. The Harmony of Idealism. Testing the principle of idealism by the preceding axioms derived from the report of the reason, we find that it harmonizes with each and contradicts none. The idealistic conception of creation is compatible with the following facts of spirit, which is ultimate reality, as stated in the basic postulate and axioms. 1. The fact that spirit is the essence, nature, substance, and principle of all that is. 2. The fact that spirit is one, in the sense of absolute unity. 3. The fact that spirit is absolute, infinite, ultimate, original, causeless, unchangeable, indivisible, total, formless, independent. 4. The fact that spirit is infinite substance, infinite energy, infinite mind, infinite life, infinite law. It will be noticed especially that under the principle of idealism, creation by spirit is possible without affecting the unity, oneness, totality, independence, absoluteness, infinity, and particularly without violating the indivisibility and unchangeableness of spirit.
And the guardians.
No other theory or explanation of creation of the many by the one escapes the violation of these essential facts of ultimate reality. It is seen to be the only possible logical explanation of creation. In every other explanation of creation, it is seen to be necessary for the one to undergo change, or to undergo separation, division, subtraction, or addition in order to manifest the many. Either the one had to divide into parts, or to change itself into. The mastery of being. 112. Something else by becoming. In such cases, not only does the one have to divide and separate itself into parts, but it also continually changes itself in these parts to the infinite variety of forms, shapes, and activities of the phenomenal universe. It brings itself under the law of change. Under the idealistic conception, on the contrary, the one does not change, nor does it divide itself into parts. In its mind principle, the universe of appearances comes and goes. The infinite changes affect not the one. The infinite number of forms and shapes affects not the integrity of the one. Such is the report of reason regarding the nature of creation, and the creation of nature. 113. Chapter 17. Practical Idealism. The wise, while realizing the idealistic nature of the phenomenal universe, and the fact that it has no existence except as ideal appearance and spirit considered as infinite mind, nevertheless have held that, for the practical purposes of life and living in the world of appearances, the universe and nature must be considered as existent. Those who fail to realize that a little learning is a dangerous thing run the risk of falling into the sad error of believing that the idealistic nature of the universe renders it unreal for practical purposes, and that its laws may be denied and defied. The wise hold that the laws of each plane of existence govern those abiding on that plane, that those living in nature are bound by nature's laws. The laws of the physical plane may be transcended only by those who have transcended that plane in life and being, and such are no longer men. This does not mean that nature's physical laws are the only laws, for there are finer forces and higher laws which are realized by life as it ascends in the scale of being. Laws spring from law, and law is identical with ultimate reality, or spirit. For the practical purposes of phenomenal life and living, the phenomenal universe may be accepted as existent, and not as mere illusion, or nothingness. Mastery of its activities. The mastery of being. 114. And release from its bondage is possible only to those who recognize the fact of its idealistic nature, and its actual and real basis and support in spirit. The outer form has its phenomenal and practical existence, while spirit is the actual, fundamental, and ultimate reality. Wisdom arises from an understanding and reconciliation of this paradox. The conception of the ideal appearance of the universe does not in any way deny the relative qualities and finite relations of the phenomena of the world of appearances. Natural physical laws proceed in the same way, whether we conceive matter, energy, mind, or spirit to be ultimate reality. Electrons and planets revolve, gravitation persists, the laws of mathematics continue to be valid, whether we conceive the universe to be composed of particles of matter grouped together in manifold forms and shapes manifesting manifold forms of activity, or else centers of activity in universal energy, or whether we conceive the universe and its particular parts to be shapes, forms, and activities, ideal appearances, in the infinite mind principle and the ultimate substance principle of spirit. If all substance is the substance of spirit, then all things must be in and of that substance, and therefore must be substantial and real to the highest possible degree. The universal ether can give no more substantiality and reality to the universe than does spirit considered as infinite substance. Even the Vedantins, whose thinkers fear not to follow the thought of philosophers in extreme conclusion, who say, wrong is right, the world is false, and who claim that the phenomenal universe arises by virtue of the existence of mind, the inequilibrium scientist would hold the whole phenomenal world, both in its subjective and objective areas. Practical idealism. 115. Real. It is as real as anything can be to the ordinary mind. It is not mere emptiness, as the Buddhists maintain. And thus the Vedanta philosophy leaves to every man a wide sphere of real usefulness, and places him under a law as strict and binding as anything can be in this transitory life. The ideal appearances in infinite mind, spirit, are second in reality only to spirit itself. There can be nothing more real than the universe, except spirit itself. The laws of time, space, causation, and nature are included in spirit's cosmic idea of the universe. They are thus made perfectly valid and effective to all phenomenal things. There is every difference between the relative ideas and mental images in the finite minds of men, and the cosmic ideas and images in the infinite mind of spirit. The world must not be regarded as a mere dream, unless one also regards his personal self as a figure in that dream. We say, his personal self to distinguish it from his real self. It is true that we may assert the mere appearance of the natural world and refuse to eat, drink, and clothe ourselves, but in so doing we will injure our physical body, which is also an appearance, and may even destroy our personal being, which is also an appearance, at the last. So long as we live and move, and have our personal and finite being in the physical world, we must recognize and obey the physical laws of that world. Things dwelling on any particular plane of existence either must come under the laws of that plane, or else transcend that plane in their being. We have no desire to imply that the phenomenal world is pure illusion. On the contrary, we wish you to remember that it is second in possible reality only to spirit itself. It may help you to think of the phenomenal world as real, and of spirit as superreal. Do not make the mistake of considering the world as an illusory nothing. It and all in it are real things in the world of things. It is only when we rise above thingness that we find the reality of superthingness. Remember that the world considered as an idea of spirit is just as real and as practical as when considered as the expression and manifestation of the mastery of being. 116. Energy of the universal ether of science. Carry always in mind the idea well expressed by an authority, who said, "Phenomena do not change with our varying views as to what things really are. The phenomenal world is under law and laws, heed ye them." Finally, it must be remembered that while the universe and its particular parts are but ideal appearances in spirit, it is likewise true that spirit is immanent and abiding in the universe, and in each and every of its manifestations down to the most insignificant. Just as all is in spirit, so is spirit in all. Spirit is ever the universal creative spirit of nature, every shape, form, and activity in nature. The presence and energy of spirit is ever perceived manifesting in shape, form, and activity. The veil of matter serves not only to conceal spirit, but also to reveal it. Just as the fluttering flag and the moving field of grain serve to reveal the presence and power of the breeze which is animating them, and which in itself cannot be seen, so do the moving shapes and forms and activities of the universe serve to indicate the presence and power of spirit ever behind them. This fact, remembered, should serve to forever remove all ideas of the practical unreality and illusion of the universe. While the shape, form, and physical activity is and must be but mere appearance, the animating power acting and moving in that shape and form and activity is ultimate reality itself, spirit. The garment is seen to be but appearance, but the reality wearing it is the only real thing there is. You, the individual I which is now receiving this instruction, are far greater, grander, and infinitely more real than you have been led to believe under the fallacious conceptions regarding the nature of the universe. Whatever the universe may or may not be, you may bring yourself to a recognition, realization, and manifestation of your real self, which will transcend any idea. Born of the finiteness of your being. When the soul receives its illumination, universes may come and go and matter not, for the soul perceives in its I am the one supreme fact of reality. 117. Chapter 18. The Creation of Nature. Statement: Spirit creates the cosmos by evolution, preserves it by balance, recreates it by devolution, and yet these three, in truth, are but three forms of the creation of nature. The cosmos. By the cosmos is meant the universe, or universality of created things, so called from the order, arrangement, and harmony displayed in it, as opposed to chaos. Many philosophers have preferred the Greek term cosmos to the Latin one, universum, in expressing the idea of the created world. The Latin term, from which our term universe arose, meant simply oneness of creation, while the Greek term cosmos implies the existence of absolute law, order, harmony, system, and logical arrangement in addition to the idea of the oneness of nature. The term in question is derived from a Greek word meaning order. The term the cosmos, as applied to the orderly universe, was first used by Pythagoras. His followers, Philaeus, Callicratidas, and others, adopted the term, as did the philosophic poets, Xenophanes, Parmenides, and Empedocles. It was finally adopted as a philosophic term. In general use, the Stoics also employed it as expressing the mastery of being. 118. Anima mundi, or world spirit. In essence, the term the cosmos is directly opposed to the term chaos, which means yawning, empty space, or the disorderly universe, or massive universal matter in confusion, the world without form and void. Nature. The term nature is used to express the universe as distinguished from the creative, creation, the world of created things, the powers which carry on creation, the powers concerned to produce existing phenomena, whether in sum or in detail. The term nature expresses more fully the activities of the universe, or cosmos. It is the universe or cosmos expressing itself in activities of life. Nature, then, may be considered as the expressed and expressing life of the universe, or cosmos. The beginning. The philosophers who have recognized and realized the spiritual nature of the universe, and the immanence of life and mind in nature, have speculated deeply regarding the manner or process whereby spirit creates the cosmos and endows nature with her evolutionary tendency. In order to understand the how of the cosmic processes, the student must imagine a beginning, although the highest teaching is positive that there is no beginning.
Smiles upon you.
The student must assume a beginning in order to picture the creative processes. The Mother Nature. By placing ourselves in the position of an observer of a system of universes, just before the dawn for them, we would see in the universal mind of spirit the vague manifestations of subconscious activity forcing their way up toward the field of consciousness. Toward dawn there would be manifested an almost infinitely subtle and tenuous materializing or congealing of the universal substance, caused by the formation of a nebulous idea of a nascent universe. By the creation of nature. 119. Nascent is meant coming into being, being developed. As the idea develops in universal mind, it takes on a greater, and still greater degree of materiality, just as does an idea of the human mind when one is thinking out an invention, a poem, a picture, or any other product of constructive imagination. After a time there appears a peculiar tenuous quasi-material substance, which is the mother nature of matter and physical energy, and in which abides also the possibilities of life and mind. This mother nature is akin to the universal ether of science. The Hindus distinguish between the three aspects of this mother substance, calling the matter principle Akaska, the energy principle Prana, the mental principle Manas. Western science combines the three in its conception of the universal ether. Creation of the atoms. The mother nature then begins to manifest in activities, urged on by the development of the idea in the infinite mind of spirit. Changes, modifications, and combinations of the evolving energy produce infinitesimally tiny particles of something which is neither energy nor matter, and yet which has characteristics of both. These particles are in constant vibration, as, in fact, are all created forms of energy, or matter. In each is the possibility of life and mind, pressing forward for expression. These particles circle around each other and form a miniature universe of whirling mites, which have a unity of activity, thus forming a larger particle. These larger particles, in turn circling around each other, form a still larger, and so on, until finally is evolved the particle known in science today as the ion, or electrons, etc., which are now perceived to group together and form the atom of matter. This entire process, remember, is purely mental in character. Merely the growth and development of the idea of the nature forming in universal mind. The mastery of being. 100. The appearance of matter. With the birth of the atom, matter appears. Matter, which the uninformed mind regards as the most real substance in nature, really is merely the product of the ideative thought of the universal mind of spirit. All matter is produced in this way. There is no other way in which it can be produced. Just as man may distinguish the difference between his thoughts and his mind, so is there this difference between matter and the infinite mind that thinks it into being as an idea. The idea of matter entertained by the infinite mind of spirit gives to matter its peculiar and special characteristics. Matter is just what it is, merely because the idea of it held in the infinite mind of spirit makes it just what it is. Matter does not make itself what it is. Nor does its just what it is character arise from or by chance, for there is no such thing as chance. The idea of matter includes the ideas of weight, extension, and all the other qualities of matter. The characteristics of matter are thought into it by means of the idea of matter in universal mind. And the laws governing and determining the activities of matter are also thought into being in the same idea. It is just as if a man were to form the idea of a new thing called matter in the course of writing a strange story of a strange new world, with this difference, that when universal mind forms an idea, that idea is imposed upon all other creations of universal mind. Everything that follows in the course of the evolving idea is bound by the law in terms of the idea imposed upon it in its creation. The story of evolution. The rest of the story is disappointing, but the familiar often the tale of evolution as taught by modern science. Atoms of various kinds and degrees of vibration and arrangements of particles develop different characteristics. Likes and dislikes began to manifest between them. Affinities caused certain of them to form unions and groups and move. The creation of nature. 121. And strange forms of matter appeared by reason of the different combinations. It will be seen, of course, that this evolution of form and variety arose solely by reason of the evolution at the idea of creation. The inner idea always was dependent on the material form and characteristics. The inner always preceded the outer. Atoms combined and formed molecules of a new form of matter. The molecules grouped themselves together and formed masses of material form. The vibrations of energy playing in and through matter changed its vibrations from time to time by the activities of heat, the latter being entirely a matter of vibration. The higher the vibration, the farther apart from each other do the molecules separate. The lower the vibration, the closer together do they approach each other. These degrees of nearness, or farness, cause the differences between solids, fluids, gases, and the ultra-gaseous forms of matter. Nebulae appeared, suns were formed, planets were thrown off from suns, worlds were created. Appearance of the life forms. The cooling worlds manifested new forms. As the possibility of the appearance of life and mind forms developed, the life and mind immanent in matter began to assert itself and molded forms of matter to accommodate them. This, too, of course, was part of the evolving idea in infinite mind. The crystals of the mineral first began to manifest intelligent growth and reproduction of form from the mother liquor. Then began the evolution toward organic life forms. Using the terms of modern science, let us say that first begins to appear the radiobes, then comes the chromatia, then the gymnospores and the angiospores. The chromatia is a peculiar form of matter, comprising the characteristics of both mineral and plant life. It is found in the deposits upon damp rocks, bark of trees, etc. From it developed the angiospores, which are the mastery of being. 122. Simplest forms of plant life, and the gymnospores, which are the simplest forms of animal life. From the above lowly forms to the monarch of Haeckel is but a step, although that step took millions of years of time to make the transformation. The monorin is the tiny glue drop-like cell found at the bottom of the ocean bed, without organs, without even a nucleus, and yet manifesting life and mind. Then came the amoeba, the protozoa, and the variety of elementary life forms, then the starfishes, the sea urchins, the mollusks, then evolved the fishes, the reptiles, the birds, the marsupials, the lower forms of mammals, then the higher forms, then, at last, primitive man. To go into detail here is but to repeat the pages of the familiar textbooks. And throughout all this process, during all these ages of time, there was working the evolving idea in the infinite mind of spirit. The evolution toward life. And of life is ever working out and unfolding in the idea. Living. Forms are ever being thought into being. 123. Chapter 19. Law and Change. And through this wondrous evolution, there is manifest ever invariable and unchanging law. This law is mental law, logical laws. Everything proceeds from step to step, from unfoldment to unfoldment, in orderly sequence and regularity, as if an absolutely logical process were underway, as indeed it is. By this is not meant that each step is planned out beforehand. On the contrary, each step proceeds logically the one immediately preceding it, and in turn develops the one next succeeding it. Failures are made, blind alleys are entered, but even these and their consequences are perfectly logical, and the inevitable result of all that has gone before. An experimental step here works certain results of success or failure a little farther on. Foresight is not claimed for the creative processes of universal mind any more than it is for any ideative, progressive process. It is simply a progress step by step in this direction. And in that, striving here and trying there, the unfolding idea. Being ever behind the evolution of form, shape, variety, and activity. But each step is the only possible logical step. Reason recognizes that the universe is governed by law. Each event in nature is the inevitable and necessarily determined event logically proceeding from all that has gone before. There is no. The Mastery Group. 124. Chance in nature. Law reigns everywhere throughout nature's domains. There are no exceptions, no illogical sequences, no variation from lawful and orderly procedure. Law not. This does not mean that fate rules, or that spirit predestines are. On the contrary, there is nothing consciously predestined in nature, and fate is but a word conveying a half-truth. Spirit is not consciously aware a second before an event occurs of what that event will be, and yet that event will be the only event that is logically possible, and which could occur, considering all of the existent conditions past and present. There is no arbitrary fate decreeing this or that result, but yet there exists law that causes everything to happen in exact and invariable consequence of all the conditions of the case. Fate cannot compel an unlawful, disorderly, or illogical happening or event. Fate is but a shadow of law, which men have mistaken for the real thing. Universal mind is compelled to manifest logical law in its activities by the very fact of its being universal mind. From these things arise what is called natural law, which thoughtful men have ever recognized, and which modern science, as well as ancient and modern philosophy, positively asserts to exist. Everything in the universe is under law. Nothing great or small can escape law. The fact of universal law is a positive proof of the mental origin of nature. Omnipresent. Moreover, the fact of the mental origin of nature is shown by the ever-present and ever-active manifestation of change in all natural things. We have seen elsewhere that consciousness is possible only where there is a constant change of the object of consciousness. This is true of universal mind as well as its sense mind. Consequently, we need not be surprised when we see that all nature, and all the universe, is in a constant state of flux, everything changing its shape, form, or activities from the law and change. 125. Very moment of its birth or creation. Everything is in constant motion, from atoms to suns, from universes to the particles of which atoms are composed. Shape, forms, position, activities, conditions, and all else, physical and mental, are ever changing. Nothing remains the same for two
Your
consecutive
pet's
moments,
inventory is
and no
full.
two things are ever the same at the same moment. Infinite variety and infinite change, this is the order of nature. Everything is born, rises, declines, and perishes, everything, from atoms to universes. There is nothing changeless save spirit. And this change is seen by the wise to arise from the manifestation of consciousness on the part of the infinite mind of spirit. And this consciousness is the likeness of life of the spirit of life, which is spirit. And so proceeds the course of nature, so manifests the universe, so evolves the cosmos. Under the veil of the form and shape of matter may ever be seen the spirit of life striving. Moving, changing, pulsating, evolving, building up, tearing down, rebuilding, creating, destroying, resolving, and dissolving its outward forms and shapes, and yet ever remaining constant itself. Everything becoming. Men have sought to personify these activities of nature, and to explain them by human desires. Heraclitus said that nature evidently finds pleasure in creating, and pain in holding created forms rigid, for she is ever creating, and yet ever destroying, or changing her creation. Others picture the constructive and destructive forces of nature as engaged in a titanic warfare and struggle, one striving to build up, and the other to tear down, the result being that nothing is stable, but everything is ever changing. The Hindu mythology pictures a trinity of Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. Cycles follow cycles. Worlds, nations, families, and individuals have their birth, their growth, their decline, their death. Like the tides, everything created, large and small, has the mastery of being. 126. Its rise and fall, its ebb and flow. The law of change is ever in operation. The law of activity is always evident. Nothing stands still. Everything moves. Everything changes. Everything flows. Everything passes. Everything rises. Everything falls. Everything has its reappearance in new form. Nature experiences a millions of births each second of time. In the same time she experiences a millions of deaths, and yet nature exists ever, birthless and deathless. Spirit in nature. Nature is the outward manifestation of the nature of spirit. Her activities are the expression of the consciousness of the universal mind of spirit. Her energies are the expressions of the power of spirit. Her law and orderly sequence are the manifestations of the law of spirit. And yet, outside of the universal mind of spirit, nature has no existence whatsoever. In herself she is as nothing, and yet in her manifestation she is as everything. An American playwright makes her speak through the lips of one of his characters, saying, "I am today this, yesterday, a pine upon a mountain crag, tomorrow, a butterfly, a blade of grass, a rainbow over a waterfall, a lizard warming on a rock, the rock itself, the beam of the moon. I am nothing because I am everything, everything because I am nothing." And from this consciousness of nature's universal everythingness comes to some souls that sense of the joy of life, the spirit of nature, which identifies oneself with the all, and the all with oneself. The ancient Greeks deified nature because they saw in her activities the expression of the life of the world spirit. Blessed indeed is he who can feel this great joy of nature's life flowing through his veins, thrilling his pulses, and throbbing his heart. To such a one has come a great joy, for, at the last, the wise know that the all is one, and all are part. Law and change. 127. And not apart as they seem to be. And the blood of life is a single heart, beating through God, and cloud, and me. The mastery of being. 128. 129. Chapter 20. Immanent Spirit. Statement. Spirit is immanent in all of its creation, and in every part thereof, and in essence, nature, substance, and principle is identical therewith. As students of truth are often so carried away with the almost absolute distinction between spirit and its finite creation that they lose sight of the essential fact of the oneness and the onlyness of spirit, and of the fact that creation is an expression of spirit, spirit in outward activity. Creation is not pure illusion, though many have so taught in absence of the view of the other side of truth. It is the most real thing that can be, with the exception of spirit in itself. Creation is really spirit in manifestation, not a separate thing. Just as all creation is in spirit, so is spirit immanent in all creation. By immanent is meant remaining within, inherent, internal. Therefore, creation cannot be mere illusion or delusion. Though its forms are but phantasmal appearances, fading away even as they appear, its essence, nature, substance, and very being is spirit itself. The primary laws of thought hold that the essence, nature, substance, and very being of a thing remain the same. The mastery of being. 130. Notwithstanding the difference in forms, shapes, states, or conditions under which the thing occurs, presents itself, or appears. Also, that what is always itself and never not itself. We have seen, also, that all that is in every being is in spirit. Spirit in creation. From the above we see that all that is real in creation must be in spirit. There is nowhere else in the being. As it is in spirit, it follows that spirit must be in it. For spirit is everywhere, and in everything that is, by reason of the primary fact of its nature. More than this, the real essence, nature, substance, and very being of creation, and all the parts thereof, must be actually and in fact known as spirit itself. There is nothing else but spirit to be the real essence, nature, substance, and very being of creation, and all the parts thereof, and nothing else for spirit to be, so long as there is creation in existence. Spirit is always spirit. Moreover, as spirit is always spirit, and can never be anything else but spirit, as spirit is always spirit in essence, nature, substance, and very being, notwithstanding the infinite variety of difference in the forms, shapes, states, or conditions under which it occurs, presents itself, or appears in its creation, and all the parts thereof, then it follows that spirit is the inner thing of the cosmos, and that which we call the cosmos is merely the outer thing of spirit. In this sense we see that not only is spirit immanent in the cosmos, but also that spirit, and the cosmos, and all the parts thereof, are identical in essence, nature, substance, and very being. The totality of spirit. We have seen that spirit is immutable and indivisible, changeless and inseparable. Therefore, spirit cannot change itself into the universe, neither can it divide itself into the universe. This being so, it follows that the universe and immanent spirit. 131. Every part thereof has as its essence, nature, substance, and principle, not only spirit, but actually, verily, truthfully, and in fact the totality of spirit, all spirit. This is a stupendous idea, a magnificent conception, a startling, and almost terrifying conclusion. But it is the inevitable report of trained and developed reason directed to the subject. It is the ultimate report of reason regarding the nature of the cosmos, which is the creation of spirit. The reason cannot escape from it. Being true to itself, it must so report. The totality of spirit is immanent in and identical with everything, fact, event, or activity of creation. It is most difficult for the average mind to assimilate this terrific report of reason. Such a mind must approach the fact very carefully, cautiously, and gradually. The reason may positively report a great truth, but it is often a long and tedious process to assimilate the truth thus reported by the reason. The mind must not attempt to bolt such a large portion of it. Truth exists, but must mentally masticate it, slowly swallow it, and then digest it gradually. It is necessary to Fletcherize the truth, to allow it to swallow itself as it dissolves in the saliva of apperception, and, finally, to allow it time, quiet, and ease in its digestion. Otherwise the outraged mind may indignantly regurgitate it, or else, retaining it, may give its owner a severe attack of mental and spiritual dyspepsia. The truth may be masticated by illustrations from previous experience. Apperception consists in assimilation of new perceptions with old ones. If the mind is given an illustration of some familiar experience, it will associate the new fact with it, and all will then be well. Therefore, let us consider a few familiar experiences as an illustration of this truth. Illustration. Everyone has a mind. Everyone creates ideas, images, and thoughts in that mind. Mental images, thought forms, mental creations are always appearing in mind. The mind is never. The mastery of being. 132. Inactive on all of its planes, at any time, even in sleep. It is always creating, working, manufacturing, and everything in it is constantly changing, while the mind itself persists. And everything that is created in the mind is always associated with other creations that precede or follow it. The law of continuity and association is ever evident and active in mental processes. The law of change is equally evident there. In fact, every law that we have seen to be manifest in the cosmos may be seen in operation in the processes of the mind. We have seen that mind creates thought forms, images, etc. How? Does it take some of its own material, make up thought, and then set it adrift for itself? Apparently not. It is unthinkable that mind can take material from itself, use it up, and set it adrift in this way. How, then, can it create thought? Simply in the way of mental appearance or presentation to itself. In some way different from anything else we see in nature, it is able to form in itself, not out of itself, thought forms, mental images, etc., hold them up to its own inspection and consideration, and then dismiss them. And all the time mind itself remains unchanged in essence, nature, substance, and principle. So far the illustration seems to go on all fours, as the lawyers say, with spirit in creation, does it not? Let us pursue it further, and see whether or not it will continue to work out. Immanence in thought. A leading authority says, we are never conscious of any experience separated or detached from the mind. You yourself enter as a constituent into every mental fact of which you are conscious. In other words, in being conscious of mental facts we are conscious of ourselves. As you never know the act or state of experience apart from yourself, so you never know yourself apart from the act or state of experience. The self of consciousness exists, not apart from, but as an element of the various experiences of which we are conscious. Is not this a good illustration of the immanence of the thinker in his immanent spirit? 133. Thought creations? Raise this idea to the universal. And have we not a fair working illustration of the presence of creation in spirit, and the immanence of spirit in creation? Characters. But, you may object, this illustration may do very well so far as inanimate objects go, but how about living beings, persons with distinct characters? The mind does not think characters into being. Doesn't it? Consider a moment. Do not novelists, poets, and dramatists create characters in their mind? Do they not live themselves out in their characters? So real are these created characters that we feel as if they were real characters we have known, we weep over them, and rejoice with them. But the characters would be nothing whatever unless the mind and life of their creators were in them. Othello would be nothing were it not for Shakespeare. Uriah Heep would be nothing were it not for Dickens. These creators enter into their characters and impart life to them. They live through them, fool through them, act through them, speak through them. Note this, just as these characters exist in the mind creating them, so does the mind creating them exist in and through the characters. The character is in the creator is in the character. Is Othello himself or his creator? The Moor or Shakespeare? Is Uriah Heep merely the character who is so humble, so very humble, or is he Dickens looking through Uriah's eyes and speaking through his lips? Where does the creator leave off and character begin? The artist in his creations. Moreover, the writer, poet, or dramatist frequently arrives at a knowledge of himself by the very creation of his characters. He knows himself by reason of them just as others know him by reason of them. The creative artist unfolds his own nature by reason of the unfoldment of his characters. What has been said here regarding the creation of characters in fiction, poetry? The mastery of being. 134. Or the drama is also true, perhaps still more true, in the case of the painter or sculptor who materializes his mental creations. He not only lives through them, but he also gives to them objective form. When we view the Venus of Milo, We see the soul of the sculptor long since passed from mortal view. It lives in and through its creation. When we gaze at the inscrutable smile on the lips of the Mona Lisa, we are in touch with the soul of Leonardo da Vinci, the artist who lived several hundred years ago. These men not only created these characters and lived through them, but gave to them objective shape and form, and continue to live through their own material bodies. Yes, characters may be mentally created as well as mere forms, images, and abstract ideas. But, you say, these are but figurative examples. These creations are not real. They do not actually live and move, and have their being in material form. True, but give to the artist infinity of being, absolute power, and infinite substance of mind, what would result? And remember that he in finite may work out his mental creations in matter by the use of his hands. Cannot infinite spirit so work it out without the necessity of hands, particularly if we stop to consider that the substance of universal mind is the ultimate substance, the substance of substance? Could not such a mind crystallize, or congeal its thoughts into objective form if it so desired? Identity and totality. There is, however, one more point not as yet brought out in the illustration, the fact that the totality of spirit is in the smallest detail of the manifestation. Going back to the illustration for a moment more, we may see that mind cannot be divided, it is a whole.
You have completed
Therefore the whole mind is back of and immanent in the smallest thought. Not all of its power, perhaps, but all of its being. It was not a part of Shakespeare's mind that created Othello, and was immanent in it, not a part of the mind of Dickens that created and lived through Uriah. Immanent spirit. 135. Heat, not a part of the mind of the unknown artist that created and lived in and through the Venus of Milo, not a part of the mind of Leonardo da Vinci that created and smiles through the countenance of the Mona Lisa. Mind, being immaterial, does not occupy space. It cannot be divided into parts. It is a unity, indivisible. Wherever unity is at all, there must all of it be. It must always be regarded as a whole. Here, too, we find the illustration sustains us. But apart from the aptness and fitness of any finite illustration, the reason reports that all creation must be in spirit, that spirit must be in all creation, that the totality of spirit is back of, behind, and in every detail of creation. For all that is in spirit. Spirit cannot be other than itself, and is always itself. Spirit remains the same in its essence, nature, substance, and very being, notwithstanding the differences apparent in the forms, shapes, states, and conditions of its creation, the phenomenal aspects in which it occurs, appears, and presents itself. And, finally, spirit being immutable and indivisible cannot change itself into anything, not divide itself into anything. It thus follows that whatever is dwells and abides in the totality of spirit, and the totality of spirit is immanent in it and, at the last, is identical with it. Here, then, have we arrived at the end of this stage of the journey. Here we have attained the end of our inquiry. We have found ultimate reality for which we sought. We have found it at the very center of our own being. Later we may learn how to manifest it in our own lives, but first we must pause to fully assimilate the knowledge we have gained. The Mastery of Being. 136. 137.
Hello.
Chapter 21. Creative Power of Thought. We have seen that man is the expression of spirit. Spirit is immanent in him in its totality. Man may express as much of the creative power of spirit as he is capable of focusing and manifesting in conscious realization. The power of thought is recognized by all students of psychology, mysticism, and occultism, but very few of the many theories advanced to account for the same are true. The majority endeavor to account for thought power by means of physical analogies, such as thought waves, thought vibrations, etc. But the whole secret lies in the fact that man is a miniature edition of spirit. He is the microcosm to the macrocosm of spirit. The law of spirit is also the law of man's mentality. What spirit does on the infinite scale man may do on the finite scale. The activities of spirit are purely creative. Spirit is forever and forever creating. Even the destructive activities of spirit are really creative, for it is but a rearrangement of old materials in new forms. The old perishes to give birth to the new. The law of change is but an expression of the creative law, which lies at the heart of the will and ideation of spirit. Spirit is ever willing and desirous of expressing itself in creative activity. The mastery of being. 138. Loses no opportunity for so doing, and apparently welcomes any creative invitation on the part of man. How man may create. Man, when he understands his spiritual nature and possibilities, may direct the inner activities of spirit along his own lines. He may do this through and by reason of the ideative powers of his mind, building up ideals and mental forms in his mind, and allowing the will to flow through these. Man is able to materialize his ideas and mental pictures in objective and material form. He thus becomes a miniature world builder, for every man's world is his individual universe. When man understands this, he is no longer the slave of circumstances, but becomes a creative master of circumstances.
I am at your service.
From being the passive chessman on the board of life, he takes a hand in the game and makes moves on his own account. We have given but a hint here of the why and how of the employment of the creative power of thought by man. But in this hint is contained the secret of the entire field of the activities of creative thought which has attracted so much attention of recent years from the followers of the New Thought and allied movements. The hundreds of books written on the subject, with their often startling and bizarre theories, really seek to teach this one fact. One may study for years without finding the master key to the science of creative thought. But here it is given in a few lines, manifest by ideation and volition, by mental images and will, the creative spiritual power, which is immanent in you by reason of your identity with spirit. Recognition and manifestation. But man can manifest only in the degree that he really recognizes and realizes the truth. More than a mere intellectual acceptance is required. Man must feel in his very heart and soul that spirit is in him, and he in spirit, that, at the last, spirit and creative power of thought. 139. He are identical in the totality of essence, nature, substance, and principle. This realization is often a matter of slow and gradual development. Man has been so hypnotized with the belief in his own separateness and inferiority that he fails to realize inwardly the truth, even when he recognizes it intellectually. It is only when the spirit in him wakes up to the fact that it is itself in verity, truth, and fact in man, it is only then that man is able to exercise his creative power. But every step in that direction brings its reward and success. Every step on the path of attainment gives a better, higher, and clearer view of the surrounding mental country, and man strengthens his spiritual limbs by the exercise on the path. Man is like a young spiritual giant, he has not as yet learned his own strength. As he awakens to the facts of his being, then he discovers his latent powers, possibilities, and capabilities. Often this recognition comes to him only when he hears the call of another who has discovered his inner strength. The awakened lion. The Orientals have a fable which illustrates this. A lion cub strayed away from its mother and the rest of the brood, and, becoming lost, was adopted by a sheep which had lost her own lamb. The lion grew up with the sheep of the flock, and never dreamed that he was other than a sheep. But finally one day on the crest of a neighboring hill appeared another lion, grown up, magnificent of build, and with great tawny mane. With sonorous voice, roaring proud defiance to the world, the visiting lion stood, vibrating the air with the strength of his call.
How may I help you?
The lion, who had thought himself a sheep, listened like one in a trance. Something within him was touched, something stirred within his inner being. A moment he paused, and then, sending forth an answering roar, which shook the very hills around him, leaped off to join his brother on the hills. He had discovered that he was a lion. Something like this happens at times to men and women when they hear the note of someone who has the mastery of being. 140. Discovered the mastery of being within himself, and who sends forward the message of spirit to his brothers and sisters on the plains among the sheep. The awakened spirit is roused to the recognition and realization of itself in man, and, as a great teacher expresses it hews open the path, as the lightning flash splits the darkness, dissolves doubts, cuts knots of chronic impossibility, melts circumstances, pierces shadows like a flash of glory, dashes through the jungle of appearances like the horn of the unicorn. It is the sword of the spirit of truth, the flash of the will that can. In this perception, and this alone, is to be found the secret of creative thought of the mind of man. Make it your own, your very own. Let the warrior within you fight the battles of life for and through you, for he is your real self, the abiding spirit, which is perceived as yourself at the last. Mastery. Man is master of his being in the degree of his recognition, realization, and manifestation of his identity with spirit. In the degree that he allows spirit to unfold and manifest itself through him in the directions of conscious recognition of the real self, which is spirit, so will be the degree of his mastery. As spirit awakens to self-consciousness within him, it will raise him up to as yet undreamed of heights of attainment and mastery. In the above few words is to be found the key to the demonstration of those who have awakened to the something within, the experience of inner being, which has always been known to the wise of the race. Many have stumbled unawares upon this great truth of being, and have manifested its power without being aware of the nature of the something within which has manifested its power and glory in their soul. It is as if spirit had been indulging in a dream, imagining itself to be John Jones or Mary Smith, and then gradually awakens to creative power of thought. 141. The realization that these are simply forms of disguise or masks used in the dramatization of the universe. The awakening spirit gradually asserts itself and manifests its power as its true consciousness increases and grows clear. This, in effect, is what the evolving soul of man is doing. From simple consciousness it has passed on through many stages into self-consciousness, and is now proceeding to cosmic consciousness of its identity with all. The mastery of being. 142. 143. Chapter 22. Identity with Spirit. Statement: Spirit identifies itself with those of its characterizations which demonstrate their ability to consciously identify themselves with it. The conscious recognition of such identity by the intellect constitutes the perception of truth, the conscious realization of it by the intuition constitutes illumination, the conscious manifestation and demonstration of it by volition and ideation constitutes the mastery of being. The message of truth. In the above statement is announced the message of the perception of truth, of illumination, of the mastery of being. It is the highest message possible of delivery to man. In it is contained the gist and essence of all esoteric and occult teaching. Book after book may be written to elaborate and illustrate this truth, but the essence ever remains the same, for it is the very truth of truth. The perception of truth. In the preceding chapters we have sought to bring to the student the first stage of the conscious recognition of infinite identification, the conscious recognition by the intellect. The mastery stage. 144. Which constitutes the perception of truth. To this end the axioms embodying the highest report of the reason have been presented to you, and you have been invited to make them your own. The practice and habitual employment of the axioms of reality will exercise and develop the intellect to the point where the absolute conscious recognition of spirit becomes a fact of your mental being. But the above statement mentions the existence of two succeeding stages, that of conscious realization by the intuition, and conscious manifestation and demonstration by volition and ideation. These are the stages of illumination and mastery, respectively. Let us now consider them. Intuition. The statement announces that the conscious realization of the identity with spirit by the intuition constitutes illumination. Let us pause a moment to consider what intuition is, and how one may realize truth by means of it. Intuition is defined as direct apprehension or cognition, immediate knowledge, as in perception or consciousness involving no reasoning process, perception by the mind immediately and without the intervention of argument or testimony. The term was first used in the scholastic philosophy of many centuries ago, where it signified the means whereby man attained a knowledge of God without the need of the reasoning faculties. It afterward passed into general philosophy, where it was used to indicate the supposed elemental knowledge of certain general facts and truths of the universe. In a closer usage, it was employed to designate a supposed faculty of the mind, possessed by a favored few, which was superior to reason. And which enabled its possessors to philosophize and unify. Impossible for the common man to depend solely upon reason. Identity with spirit. 145. Reason versus intuition. Modern philosophy, however, and modern psychology in particular, have been inclined to deny the validity of the so-called intuitive faculties of man. It is now generally held that the so-called intuitions are the products of evolution and heredity, and are akin to race memory. In short, intuition is held to be identical with instinct. Innate ideas are denied upon the same grounds. The general philosophic thought of today holds that reason is the only source of knowledge possible to man, and echoes the words of Jamie, the Sufi poet. And first with reason, which is also best, reason that rights the wanderer, that completes the imperfect, reason that resolves the knot of either world, and sees beyond the veil. For reason is the fountain spring of old from which the prophets drew, and none beside.
Yes.
Who boasts of other inspiration, lies. There are no other prophets than the wise. Esoteric teaching. But in the occult and esoteric teaching of all ages there is ever found the insistent claim that man possesses certain faculties, or powers of intuitive perception, not adapted to receiving reports of the objective world, but which may and do receive reports from one's own inner nature, and being which are impossible to the sense organs, or the perception arising therefrom. Such teachings hold that man is able to turn his mental gaze inward, as well as outward, and thus to obtain reliable and valid reports of his own inner nature and being, which may afterward be considered by the reason and deductions made therefrom. As we have said, philosophy and science have frowned upon this idea, and have declared it to be but vain imagination. But there has recently arisen in the philosophical firmament the mastery of being. 146. New philosopher of the first magnitude, who positively asserts the existence of intuition in man, and declares that there is a certain knowledge possible only through the exercise of intuition, the reason being unable to explore the field of such knowledge. This philosopher of the revolutionary idea is Henri Bergson, whose work is now attracting the attention of the world of philosophy. The new philosophy. Bergson claims that truth is known to man only through the interaction of intellect and intuition. He claims that intellect informs us only regarding material things. Intuition informs us only regarding the inner nature and facts of life and being. He claims that the intellect is a nucleus formed by a contraction or narrowing of the power of consciousness, and that around it is a fringe of more comprehensive consciousness. In the latter the power of intuition lies. The intellect, he says, has been constructed by the evolutionary life forces to serve the practical purposes of the creatures possessing it, and that its very limitations add to its usefulness in its own particular field. Bergson insists that the intellect is neither supreme nor absolute, not even the only source of knowledge. Intuition is held not to be compared with the intellect so far as the practical knowledge of the objective world is concerned, our practical knowledge being almost entirely intellectual. But in its own field, intuition far surpasses the intellect, and gives us knowledge utterly unknown to the latter. Bergson, however, claims that, while the knowledge reported by intuition is perfect in its nature, it is limited in its scope. For, as he says, there are things that the intellect alone is able to seek, but that by itself it will never find. Those things intuition alone can find, but it will never seek them of itself. Identity with spirit. 147. The something within. Schopenhauer, in advancing his conception of the world will, held that the intellect can never understand or know the will, the latter being more elemental than reason. He held, however, that the existence of the will as ultimate principle can be perceived in a unique way by turning the mental gaze inward. At the very center of being will be found the will, and its nature may be understood only by a study of its activities within ourselves. The Hindu philosophers have always held that the essence of being, spirit, may be perceived intuitively by turning inward the perceptive activities by the concentrated exercise of the will. The pages of the writings of the mystics are filled with instances of the conscious intuitive perception of union with God, or similar transcendental mental states. So common in the experience of the race is this mental phenomenon, that it is everywhere recognized under the name of illumination. Mystic illumination. By illumination is meant the illumining, or lighting up of the mind by an influx of new knowledge and perception. Those who have attained this stage of intuition have been known as the Illuminati, this title having been used by the Rosicrucians and other organizations of mystics. Illumination is generally held to be a strange, mystic experience or inrush of new knowledge. Such is the conception of the mystics, and such is the conception of the idea of cosmic consciousness of which so much has been heard during the past decade. This form of illumination has been common in all phases of religious thought and practice, and even outside of religious bodies. Many of the saints of all religions have recited instances of it, while, on the other hand, men like Tennyson and Whitman have testified to similar experiences. The underlying experience common to all those relating the strange happening is that of a sudden sense of oneness with God or being. This sense of oneness has been variously interpreted by the members of the several religious. The mastery of being. 148. Beliefs favored by those experiencing it, but its universality takes it out from creed interpretation or sect possession and raises it to a much more exalted plane. Maurice Buck, in his work on cosmic consciousness, claims that it is an inevitable result of the evolution of consciousness in the race, and that all the race eventually will experience it, although at present only a few advanced individuals know it in consciousness. He claims that just as mere sensation was succeeded by simple consciousness, and this later by self-consciousness, so will the latter be succeeded by this universal consciousness, in which the individual is consciously identified with the all. Intellectual illumination. Apart from these instances of mystic experiences, many careful, conservative, thoughtful men of philosophic tendency and temperament have experienced a gradual unfoldment of some inner faculty of the mind which brought to them a consciousness of an identity with an underlying something which they found at the very center of their being, and which was recognized as being something far more elemental, fundamental, and real than the intellectual self or ego. This experience would seem to be analogous to that asserted by Schopenhauer, who asserted that the consciousness of the ego, or I of each individual is in reality the consciousing of the point of connection, or identity with the world will, or spirit. This experience is not the mystic, ecstatic union of religious devotees or poets, but rather the calm awareness of the philosophic temperament. And instead of being regarded by those experiencing it as a supernatural or transcendental happening, it is treated as a valid and natural report of some form of inner perception, and is then passed on to the reason for classification and deduction. Identity with spirit. 149. Seeing and feeling. The statement makes the distinction between the recognition by the intellect and the realization by the intuition, the first resulting in the perception of truth, and the latter in illumination. The distinction may well be considered in the terms of certain esoteric teachings, in which the recognition by the intellect is considered as the seeing phase of perception, and the realization by the intuition as the feeling phase of the perception. The real, full, perfect, and complete knowledge of truth comes only from the combined report of intellect and intuition, the recognition joined to the realization. It is only when one both sees and feels the truth that he knows the truth. Seeing without the accompanying feeling is cold and unsatisfying, the intellect never satisfying the inner longing for truth, while feeling without the seeing is likewise unsatisfying, except perhaps to the poet or religious enthusiast. For the outraged intellect voices its disapproval and gives its owner no peace. It is only when the intuition and intellect join hands, when they stand side by side and see the same truth, that the entire mental being is satisfied and finds peace. The coming of peace. Some of the wisest of the race, in the older schools of esoteric teaching, have insisted that the only satisfying illumination is that of the illumination of the intellect by the intuition, when the power of intuition is admitted to the intellect and runs freely over its wires and brings the glow to the lamps of reason. Then and then alone comes that satisfying peace, that calm of seeing and rest of feeling, that peace which passeth all understanding. Illumination is the clearing away of the smoke of illusion from the tear-stained eyes of the individual, that he may see what he is in his real self. He then perceives not only that he lives and moves and has his being in spirit, but also that spirit, in its totality of being, lives and moves and has its being in. The Mastery of Being. 150. Hymn. Illumination comes gradually to some, instantaneously to others. It comes to no two alike. It calls men and women in the field, the workshop, the kitchen, as well as in the palace, or in the parlor. It respects not position nor condition. It ever calls its own to it. When the pupil is ready, the master appears. Wheresoever I go, mine own await me. Wheresoever I pass, mine own know my footsteps and follow me. As a great teacher has said, and the prophecy is this, that those who shall devotedly and sincerely adopt the message of truth, rationally interpreted, must inevitably perceive the truth, realize the truth whereby immortality, satisfaction, and freedom are secured. Nirvana. An authority, speaking for the Buddhist conception of spirit, says, there is a Japanese proverb which says, there are many roads up to the mountain, but it is always the same moon that is seen from the top. The Japanese themselves, with a liberality worthy of imitation, apply this saying to different forms of religious belief. The mountain may well typify matter, and the summit the highest point on which a climber can stand and maintain his separate individual existence in terms of consciousness drawn from the material world. This peak may be accessible by any religion, or without any religion, but Buddhism, and its genetically associated systems look beyond. The mountaintop is the apotheosis of personal existence, the highest form of consciousness that can be expressed in terms of separate individuality, a sublime elevation where many a pilgrim is content to pause. Below him are the kingdoms.
Welcome, friend.
Above him are the stars, the kingdoms and stars alike are his. But it is not the end. Deeper than the kingdoms and higher than the stars is the sky that holds them all. And there alone is peace, that peace which the material world cannot give, the peace which passeth understanding trained on material things, infinite and eternal peace, the peace of limitless consciousness unified with limitless will. That peace is nirvana. Identity with spirit. 151. Rest for reason. Another authority says, as knowledge and wisdom increase, as our eyes are opened more fully to the eternal verities, as we more fully realize the marvelous wonders of the universe, and as we shall be in better accord, we may finally come to recognize that our consciousness of God is only a part of God's consciousness of himself, all bodies modes of infinite extension, all souls modes of infinite thought. And as we see more clearly and feel more vividly that we are inherent parts of its glorious unity, we may hope to reach that ultimate real principle of knowledge and being without which there can be no rest for reason, or unity in the universe. A poet of our Western land has voiced this truth forcibly in the following lines. Illusion. By Eloise Wilcox. God and I in space alone, and nobody else in view. And where are the people, O Lord, I said, the earth below and the sky o'erhead, and the dead whom once I knew? That was a dream, God smiled and said, a dream that seemed to be true. There were no people living or dead, there was no earth and no sky o'erhead, there was only myself and you.
You a new
Why
recruit?
do I feel no fear? I ask, meeting you here in this way. For I have sinned, I know full well, and is there heaven, and is there hell, and is this the judgment day? Nay, those were dreams, the great God said, dreams that have ceased to be. There is no such thing as fear or sin. The Mastery of Being. 152. There is no you never have
You a
been.
new recruit?
There is nothing at all but me. Avatars of the Almighty. Harold Balche, in his series of articles in the Cosmopolitan a year or so ago, said, and now that man has discovered that there resides in his nature a spirit or energy that is divine, the colleges say, and that he can summon it to work his will, the potency and future operations of this force no man can compute. Science has found a way through psychology to God, the opportunities for the race, through invoking in the human consciousness the brooding spirit that fills all space, are absolutely infinite. Science, therefore, is demonstrating along new lines, or at least is claiming to demonstrate, that man is God made manifest. And modern philosophy, as set forth in American universities, holds this incarnation not as a fanciful and merely beautiful ideal, but as a working and understandable principle in the soul of humanity. The professors therefore stand as the exponents of the teaching that man is the embodiment and conscious expression of the force that guides all life and holds all matter in its course. Not merely in religious rhetoric, but in reality, the schoolmen say, is man the avatar of God? Man has begun the cycle of that triumphal daring prophesied by ancient seers, and which appealed so potently to the imagination of Poe, who said, think that the sense of individual identity will be gradually merged in the general consciousness. That man, for example, will at length attain that awfully triumphant epoch when he shall recognize his existence as that of Jehovah. This is not an atheistic banishment of God or his holy angels, but is, on the contrary, enthronement of a new Jehovah, a God that has become conscious and potent in the human mind. The promise. Passing on from this consideration, we call your attention to the promise contained in the first lines of the statement given. Identity with Spirit. 153. At the beginning of this chapter, Spirit identifies itself with those of its characterizations which demonstrate their ability to consciously identify themselves with it. The importance of this message is at first overlooked by many who read the words. It is really a promise and a message that Spirit will identify itself with those who recognize their identity with it. In the degree of the recognition and realization of the identity by the individual, so will Spirit identify and manifest itself with and through the individual. As man begins to realize what he really is, he begins to be able to manifest that reality and being through his individual channels of expression. And, accordingly, there begins that conscious manifestation by volition and ideation, which constitutes the mastery of being. The mastery of being. When man discovers his identity with Spirit, he begins to manifest creation on his own account. No longer a passive instrument, tool, or chessman in the cosmic life, he becomes a center of creative power in himself. It is true that he sees the phenomenal world for what it really is. He sees that prizes and rewards of life are mere baubles and trinkets, and he strives no longer for them for themselves. But, in place of the old illusion, he sees a creative purpose in the cosmic activities, a meaning in the universal becoming, and he smiles and takes his place again on the stage of life, playing his part willingly, cheerfully, confidently, and understandingly. His peep behind the scenes does not interfere with his characterization and the portrayal of his appointed part. On the contrary, he plays his part all the better by reason of his knowing. He loses all fear of death. He fears neither life nor death, neither does he seek death nor avoid it.
I am at your service.
He seeks neither participation nor renunciation of life. He simply lives, for to live is the object of life. As the sense of his real nature and being dawn upon him, the sense of his powers begin to manifest in his consciousness. He soon learns that his ideation and volition are real, the same. The mastery of being. 154. Powers with which the universe is created and manifested. He finds that his ideation, when vitalized with his volition, materializes and takes on objective reality. He finds that his ideals tend to become real. He discovers that circumstances, environment, conditions, and states may be created for himself. First the sense of identity, and the belief in its power, then the ideative picture in the mind, then the volitional activities of the will, then the objective manifestation. Thus does man become a creator and build for himself a miniature universe with himself as a center. But, and this must always be remembered, man must never allow himself to become entangled in his creations. He must see them always as creations, and must never permit himself to become hypnotized by the delusion of their ultimate reality. There is always the danger of taking one's own creations too seriously, just as the world is hypnotized into accepting its own mental creations as realities. The master of being must needs learn to detach himself from his creation, and, figuratively, to stand aside and see himself act and play his part among his creations.
State your business.
Mastery requires the eyes to be kept clear of the stinging smoke of illusion. The master of the show must never allow himself to become carried away by the action of the play, lest he become the victim rather than the victor. These may be strange words to the ears of many, but those whose ears have awakened by the song of life will readily understand them. Parting words. And now, students, friends, and fellow travelers on the path, we come to the time of temporary parting. You will never be the same as you were before you studied this book. You have built your more stately mansions of thought, and will continue to build. Till thou at length act free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. Identity with Spirit. 155. You may not have accepted the message, nor have perceived the truth sought to be expressed in these lessons. But the spirit of them will remain with you. For no one who embarks on the quest for truth ever is able to permanently relinquish it nor to forsake the path. He may turn away from it, or seek to retrace his steps, and for a time will seem to have left it behind forever, but sooner or later again will the hunger for knowledge, and the thirst for truth, be felt. Again will the sound of the message penetrate to the ear, and again the pilgrim will resume the path. As Whitman says, my words will itch in your ears till you understand them. Once a truth seeker, always one. Om Mani Padme Hum. Finus. The Mastery of Being. 156. 157. Bibliography. Arnold, Edwin. The Light of Asia, or the Great Renunciation, Mahavini's Pramana being the life and teaching of Gautama, Prince of India, and founder of Buddhism, as told in verse by Indian Buddhists. London, G.B. Trubner and Company, 1879. Atkinson, William Walker. The Mastery of Being, a study of the ultimate principle of reality, and the practical application thereof. Holyoke, Massachusetts, The Elizabethtown Company, 1911. Bergson, Henri. Creative Evolution. New York, New York, Henry Holt and Company. 1911. Bigelow, William Sturgis. Buddhism and Immortality, The Ingersoll Lecture. Boston, Massachusetts and New York, New York, Houghton Mifflin Company, 1908. Balche, Harold. Avatars of the Almighty Cosmopolitan Magazine, July 1909. New York, New York, International Magazine Company, 1909. Burnell, George. The Book of Health and Science of Truth with Demonstration Devotional. Dowagia, M.I., Illumination Publishing Company, 1902. Fitzgerald, Edward. Solomon and Absol, and Ailgori.
This audio presentation of the Arcane Teaching by William Walker Edmondson is brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved. Part 1, Fundamental Principles. Lesson 1, The Arcane Teaching. The Arcane Teaching has come down to the present age through the corridors of time. From the dim ages of past eras, races, and school of thought, even those highest in the council of the custodians of the scroll are unable to trace the teaching. The time of Pythagoras, about 500 BC, and little later to ancient Greece, although they may find many reference to and extracts from the teachings of ancient Egypt and Chaldea, which serve to show that the Pythagorean and still more remote, receiving extended over centuries. Investigators have found traces of the original philosophical teaching, not the religion or the pessimism. Buddhism was received from arcane sources. Traces are also to be found in the teachings of the Kabbalah. Teachings and philosophies in the older school of Old Egypt being very close and intimate. Besides the traditions of the arcane, there is to be found the closest fraternities. Some of the teachers, however, hold that the Grecian and Egyptian schools, respectively, were but two separate offshoots of an original and older teaching. There are many arcane this as a teaching that the various occult schools gather from the legends regarding Atlantis can be reconciled with the Grecian arcane teaching, and results in the of the Egyptian teachings, many of which are still preserved in an undoubted direct line of succession, are practically identical in fundamental and basic points with the Grecian arcane teaching. And as we have said, the Persian, Median, and Chaldean legends and traditions and scraps of teaching show a common source of origin with that of ancient Greece. We are speaking now of the historical view of the subject alone. The traditions of the arcanes hold that the teaching in some form is as old as the race itself, and that it has been known to the thousands upon thousands of years ago. All traces of that so that they would grow, blossom, and bear fruit throughout the ages to follow. We do not ask you to accept this statement. It is not material. The teaching bears the evidence of its own truth within itself without needing the belief in any such authority. It agrees with the highest reason and intuition of man, and to those who are ready to receive it, it shows itself as true. We mentioned the ancient traditions only that you may know what is accepted as true by those high in authority among the arcanes. The word arcane is derived from the Latin word arcanus, meaning shut up, closed, hidden away, being derived from arca, meaning a treasure chest. The English word means hidden, concealed, secret, esoteric, mystic, so the term the arcane teaching means the secret doctrine. The arcanes are a loosely organized body of men who have lived in all countries and all times since the days of the ancient Greece and probably for thousands of years before. They keep alive the old teachings, traditions, legends, and instructions, and give the same to the few whom they meet who are deemed ready to receive the same. The innermost teachings are printed and is passed from mouth to ear, from teacher to student. Much of this inner teaching is of a nature that readers it most advise. The general principle of the arcane teachings have always been to them and by them. Portions of them may be found in the various schools of the Hermetic philosophy and among the Rosicrucians and Puritans. In Freemasonry, there are hints of the ancient teachings carefully discussed by an ordinary member of the order. The exception to the rule regarding written or printed teaching is to be found in what the arcanes know as the Arcane Scroll, which contains many arcane aphorisms or statements of teaching, and which are the authorized copies are arcane councils, who are known as the custodians of the scroll, and who are to be found unknown and working silently. These persons belong to all one. While many of these arcane aphorisms have to do with special branches of the teaching and are not allowed to be printed and distributed generally, still the custodians have always been willing that the fundamental aphorisms from the subject. Accordingly, we shall embody a number of the arcane aphorisms in this series of lessons, always quoting the These aphorisms contain the highest occult truth and principles. The arcane teaching is based upon the fundamental principle of the existence of an absolute supreme power, which is the cause and reason of the cosmos and all the manifestations contained therein, all that men call the universe. This absolute supreme power is known in the arcane teaching as the law. The law is regarded as an abstract principle of power, impossible of being represented by words or even by symbols. It is not a pantheistic deity or being. It is an absolute principle, beyond definition or description. It does not manifest itself in the universe of shapes and forms. It manifests itself into the many as the pantheistic being is held to do in certain philosophies. being causes the cosmos to arise from chaos, causes manifestation to arise from the unmanifest, causes everything from infinite nothing. The cause of being. It cannot be said to be. It cannot to be, to have a meaning. The arcane teaching is not
You have gained a level.
The law can never separate itself into bits of you and I, nor is the cosmos to be regarded as a nightmare dream, meditation, illusion, or imagination of the absolute. And the pessimistic schools of the West would have meditate, imagine, or think. Neither is it delusion or ignorance of some thought. These are qualities belonging to beings and to love. To hold otherwise is to degrade it and to deny its absoluteness. The arcane teaching holds other than the teaching from the majority of other philosophies which holds them to be identical. But this daring conception is defended and proven to be logical by the arcane teachers, and in this teaching, rational manifestation thingness. Infinity is an infinite. Sleeps the latency. Is in actuality. Is in latency. The arcane subject have been searching for the truth in other philosophies, but who have found themselves wandering logical and rational proof. This doctrine flies squarely in the face of the current philosophical dogma the heel fit. On the contrary, it boldly asserts, from nothing everything comes, or ex nihilo omnis fit. But it must be remembered that this nothing contains within itself the possibility, latency, and promise of everything. It is a no thing instead of a not. The arcane teachings hold that at the expiration of the cosmic night or period of infinite nothingness, the law moves over the emptiness of infinity, and the first activities of a new cosmic day or begin to show themselves. The first manifestation is the cosmic will or life principle. This cosmic will is the one life of the cosmos, which many philosophers it is the universal being, but it is a law and relative to it, and is not absolute. From this cosmic will, logos, demiurge, will spirit, is the cosmos is alive, and its real nature manifests in the cosmic will, under and in all manifestations of the universal action from lower to highest. Here is the world spirit, or pantheistic one-all, but it is in the cosmos is contained the three principles of substance, motion, and consciousness, respectively. From the three principles arise all the infinite variety of combinations of mind, energy, and matter, which go to make up the varieties of manifestations in the universe. The arcane teaching includes a doctrine of perpetual evolution of substance, energy, and consciousness, respectively, on all the various planes of activity. The teaching is that there are infinite planes of evolution, in groups of 7, which are subdivided in 7, and so on. The arcane teaching holds that the cosmos is regulated by the 7 laws, which are superimposed by the law upon the cosmic will, and thus upon all that is manifested. These 7 laws are as follows. The law Under this law, there is always manifested law and order in the cosmos, from suns to atoms, from heights to lows, matter, energy, and mind. There is no distinction in harmony or chance in the cosmos. 2. The law of analogy. Under this law, there is fully correspondence. What is true of the atom is true of the sun. As above, so below, and the hermeticists express it. Ex uno dis omnis. From one, know all, as the arcane axiom said. This law is applied in studying the higher planes. They may be known by the lower, just as solar systems may be known by studying the atoms and the molecules. 3. The law of sequence. Under this law, there is included the activities of what is generally known as cause and effect. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing happens without a precedent manifestation and a subsequent manifestation. Nor can it escape from acting upon that which comes after. Everything proceeds from something and is succeeded by something. 4. The law of rhythm. This law is a binding phenomenon among which is important. Everything is in constant vibration. Everything material, mental, or of energy. Vibration is to control all forces in the universe. The control of vibration forms an important part of the arcane formula. 5. The law of balance. Under this law, universal equilibrium, compensation, and balance observed in all of the manifestations of the cosmos. One thing balances another in the physical, mental, and spiritual. Everything has something set opposite it. To balance, everything has its compensation. Everything has its price. In an understanding of the law of balance, there is to be found the same. 6. The law of cyclicity. Is found the physical, mental, and spiritual. Everything moves in circles. The wise and strong convert the circles into spirals instead of traveling around in an eternal circle. The wise and strong man are all under this law and move in accordance therewith. Into the spiral in its formulas. 7. The law of opposites. Under this law is to be found the explanation of that wonderful fact in nature. The fact that everything has its opposite. Everything is and is not at the same time. Everything has its other side. Every truth is but a half-truth. Everything is a paradox. Every thesis has its antithesis. Every male contains female. The law of sequence, thus to master fate, instead of being her slave, to conquer laws by laws, to oppose principle by principle, to acquire the art of mental alchemy, or transmutation of mental states and conditions. These and many other fields of occult knowledge will the arcane teaching open out to the earnest seeker. To those who are ready, this teaching will appeal. Do you feel attracted to it? Then follow the lead of your intuition. If not, pass by it for the present, for you are not prepared. Instead, call the attention of some person more ready to it, and thus be an instrument of the law. Lesson 2. Absolute Law. The Arcane Scroll contains the following aphorisms regarding the supreme law, which in the Arcane teaching is known as the law. Aphorism 1. The law is. Aphorism 2. Beyond the law there is none. Higher than the law there is not. Elder than the law there is not. Aphorism 3. The law is the absolute, existing beyond time and space or change, transcending the three principles and the seven laws. It hath ever been, ever is, and ever shall be. Ever unique, independent, abstract, it dwelleth unknowable, unthinkable, ineffable. Aphorism 4. The law is throw light on inner meaning. Let us now consider them in detail. In this aphorism, is denotes present actual existence. It is as strong a term denoting actual existence as the English language supplies. But in the ancient arcane terminology, its Grecian equivalent was indicates. In the English language, the word is used as the third person singular of the verb be in the indicative mood present tense. But the word is and be have two entirely different original meanings, particularly when considered from the point of view of the ancient arcane school. To explain further, the word be is derived from the Greek word phu, P-H-U-O, meaning to bring forth, to produce, to be born, etc. The original meaning signifying beginning in time, existence of a preceding cause, relativity, etc. And accordingly, the ancient Greek philosophers, especially those of the arcane schools, used the term be and being to denote the relative existence of the phenomenal or manifested universe, and not in the sense of absolute existence. The word is, on the contrary, is desired from the word esti, E-S-T-I, which in turn was derived from the Sanskrit word asti, A-S-T-I, both of which denote existence in its absolute sense, without reference to birth, bringing forth, or production. In its true and arcane significance, the word is analogous to M-A-M, which had its origin in the Sanskrit asmi, A-S-M-I, signifying absolute existence, which significance was also imparted to analogous words in the Hebrew, Egyptian, and other Oriental language. The word is has the significance of the word am in the following quotation from Exodus 3:14 in the Hebrew sacred books. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. This then is the sense in which the arcane aphorism employs the term is, in the sense of absolute existence. We have taken the pains to explain this to you in length, not for the purpose of verbal hair-splitting, but in order to bring out the true occult meaning of the term. This particularly because we shall use the term being in a sense of connection with the cosmos now proceeding. Remember that there is no you have completed the question. Other isness is but being, which is relative, created, and phenomenal. In the true sense, there is other than the existence of the law. For this reason, we shall always print the word in capital letters when we use it in its arcane significance. Aphorism 2. Beyond the law, there is none. Higher than the law, there is not. Elder than the law, there is none. In these three sentences is taught the absolute omnipresence, the absolute supremacy, the eternity, and the self-existence of the law. There is not beyond it, for there is no beyond. There is not elder than it, for it is eternal and self-existent. there being nothing precedent to it to have caused or created it. We must here ask you to consider the fact that the aphorism uses the term not instead of nothing, for the reason that the arcane meaning of the two terms is different. In the arcane sense, the word not means absolute negation. That is, it denotes the absence of isness or amness, and also the absence of even relative being. Not means absolute.
You have gained in
notness,
fame.
a condition of non-existent, past, present, or future, absolute or relative. It is a positive denial of any existence whatsoever of any kind, character, or degree, past, present, or future. Further than this, language cannot go. But the words nothing and nothingness, although generally used as meaning notness, in the sense just mentioned, have an entirely different arcane significance and meaning. In the aphorisms and in all the arcane teaching, these words are used in a relative sense, a capital N being employed to denote the said use of the word. We shall consider this nothingness a little later on. Aphorism 3, the first sentence is, the law is absolute. In this sentence is stated the highest truth capable of being expressed in words. Let us examine the term and see what it really means. Absolute means, in its original and essential significance, unbound, free, unfettered, unrestrained. There are a number of derivative meanings, but the above definition gives the essential meaning of the term, and that meaning may be reduced to one word, free. In other words, absoluteness means perfect freedom, sovereignty, supremacy. There can be nothing higher than absoluteness. There can be nothing over absoluteness. There can be no power beyond absoluteness. The law of a thing or things is the sovereign power that exercises a control over it. And an absolute law is a supreme, highest, and unqualified power over all things. Therefore is the absolute called law. Therefore is the law called absolute. The term absolute law is the highest and most positive term in the language expressing power and control. There can be nothing that can oppose such power or run contrary to it,
Greetings.
or overrule it, or break it. It is power, absolutely supreme. The absolute law must not only be self-governed and uncontrolled, but must also be self-existent and causeless. For if there were aught else to have created it, or to have caused it to exist, then that other would be the absolute. The very meaning of the term precludes any outside cause affecting it. It is causeless, and it exists of and because of itself. To speak of aught causing, governing, or binding the absolute is to utter words that have no meaning. And even if we postulate a supreme being governed by the law of his own inner nature, then these inner laws, rather than the supreme being, are the absolute. So you see that at the last the law and the absolute must be the one and the same. The aphorism continues, existing beyond time and space and change, transcending the three principles and the seven laws. It hath ever been, ever is, and ever shall be. The words is, hath, ever been, and ever shall be denotes the eternality of the law. For a self-existent, causeless, absolute must be eternal. For naught could have caused it, nor could aught ever terminate it. Beyond time and space expresses its omnipresence and eternality. Time and space belong to the infinite nothingness, which is subject to the absolute law. Transcending the three principles and the seven laws. By this is meant the three principles of the cosmos, and the seven laws by which the law manifests itself through the cosmos when the latter emerges in manifestation from the unmanifest, infinity of nothingness. Transcending means, of course, surpassing, surmounting, being above, being beyond, etc. As the three principles are aspects of the cosmos, and the seven laws are caused by the absolute law, it follows that the latter is superior and over them. Ever unique, unconditioned, immutable, self-existent, self-sufficient, independent, and abstract. Let us consider the meaning of each of the words composing this remarkable sentence. Ever, always, forever, continually, without cessation. Unique, without a like or equal, unmatched, unparalleled soul. Unconditioned, not subject to conditions or limitations, hence inconceivable, incognito, immutable, unchangeable, invariable, changeless, self-existent, free from cause, existing independent of aught else, self-sufficient, sufficient for self without aid or cooperation, independent, not dependent, not subject to control, not relying on God, not subordinate or coordinated, abstract, apart from aught else, separate from aught else, existing apart in itself, etc. The above definitions need no further explanation or comment. They tell their own tale and convey their meaning, but the aphorisms clearly we must define. The aphorism closes with the following words: It dwelleth unknowable, unthinkable, ineffable. These three words have the following meaning: unknowable, that which cannot be known, being too difficult or subtle for human intellect. Unthinkable, that which cannot be made an object of thought, incapable of being thought, incognito, eluding the understanding, etc. Ineffable, incapable of being expressed in words, inexpressible, indescribable, etc. The combined idea of the three terms is well expressed by Herbert Spencer in his famous sentence: by continually seeking to know, and being continually thrown back with a deepened conviction of the impossibility of knowing, we may keep alive the consciousness that it is alike our highest wisdom